I'm Dr. John Bartemus, and I'm putting the pieces together to help you live a life at optimal. Kristen asked if we would cover MTHFR and many of the topics associated with it. MTHFR is sexy right now in the alternative health fields, and if you've heard the term MTHFR, it doesn't stand for a naughty word. What it actually is an abbreviation for an enzyme called methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. Now, that's a mouthful, so we call it MTHFR. And why is MTHFR important? Well, because if it's not functioning optimally, downstream effects that it can have are infertility, birth defects, cognitive and mood disorders, poor detoxification, estrogen issues, thyroid issues. So it has the potential to impact your health from a global perspective. So let's dig into what it is, where it is, how it functions, those sorts of things. So as you'll see behind me, we have MTHFR inside a blue box. The blue box represents a gene. MTHFR is the enzyme in the gene that has to do its job to get the gene to express itself and therefore do what it codes for. So if we expand this out, MTHFR is part of a gene that's part of a cycle here, which is a part of another cycle here, which goes this way, and there's a smaller cycle here that goes in here. There's a short cycle, and if we go up on top of this cycle here, we start with methionine, and down here it becomes homocysteine. Now, homocysteine is cardiotoxic and neurotoxic, vascular toxic. So it's associated with cardiovascular disease, it's associated with dementia, it's associated with oxidative stress and all the things that oxidative stress can lead to. So one function of the MTHFR enzyme is to turn this wheel. And as you can see, these look like gears. So if this gear turns, then this gear turns. If this gear doesn't turn, this gear won't turn, and we don't have the effects of the various gears. So as you can see, there's a little circle here that has a gene associated with it. There's other genes associated here, so we'll dig into that in a minute. But when this wheel turns, we have an amino acid called methionine. When we turn the wheel, methionine gives up a methyl group, or therefore methylates something, and is turned into homocysteine. As we just talked about, homocysteine is toxic, so the body wants to recycle it back to methionine. In order to recycle it, we need MTHFR to do its job. So what could prevent this recycling and lead to those negative downstream effects? Well, one key is that every gene requires certain nutrients to function properly. So if the MTHFR gene does not have things such as folate, okay, methylfolate specifically, if it doesn't have thyroxine or T4 thyroid hormone, if B12 isn't present, if B6 isn't present, if a thing called BH4 or biopterin isn't present, if zinc isn't present, and copper and magnesium and vitamin C and glutathione, there's a lot of things that contribute to the methylation cycle. So if you are nutrient deficient or have an unhealthy diet, then you may have methylation defects. Because the MTHFR enzyme functions at this gene, you can have genetic polymorphisms that affect the function of this enzyme. So your OBGYN may test you when you're thinking about getting pregnant for the MTHFR gene. What that means is you get a copy of each gene from each parent, meaning you got one copy of MTHFR from your mom, one copy from your dad. So the potential is that you could have two good copies, you could have one bad copy, or you could have two bad copies. What the research is saying is specific to MTHFR 677T, if you have one bad copy, you have up to a 40% potential decreased function in that gene or enzyme. If you have two bad copies, it's up to 70%. So genetics do play a role here in terms of making you susceptible to decreased function. It doesn't damn you to it, but it sets you up for potential decreased function. Then your epigenetics determines if you actually manifest that decreased function. So epigenetically, if you're toxic, if you have nutrient deficiencies, if you're inflamed, if you're infected, all of these things will impact the function of this enzyme and this gene and all the other ones in the cycle. So this went a little longer than a typical nugget, but it's a topic that cannot be easily compressed, as I'm sure you've noticed. So in answer to Kristen's question, just a quick primer of what is MTHFR. MTHFR is an enzyme that is key to the methylation cycle, which is happening billions of times a second in your body to make sure that all of these body processes are occurring, that you have good serotonin levels, good dopamine levels, good recycling of those, good estrogen levels, good thyroid function, good oxidative stress inhibition or antioxidant status, good fertility, no birth defects. All of these things are contributed to by optimal MTHFR functioning. So to dig in deeper would be a whole video series, and maybe we'll do that in the future, but hopefully this was a good primer for you and leads you down the rabbit hole to finding out more.